It's part of the International Agricultural Research portfolio, and it's a new part. And it's really trying to look at how can we get agriculture to contribute better to nutrition and health outcomes, and food is an important part of that, obviously. So we welcome you in. And we're talking about an agenda today, a discussion around public-private partnerships in the nutrition agenda that we're struggling with, and we think lots of other people are struggling with too. How to do this, there's lots of complications, there's lots of challenges, but at the end of the day, if we don't get this right, things will get worse rather than better, and there's a lot of reason to worry, I think, on the nutrition agenda. So this is really set up as kind of a discussion, and it's meant to kind of open up space for us to follow things up. We're a research group, we're quite a diverse research group, and you'll meet some of the members of that in short presentations. But we're really interested in kind of how to engage in this discussion in a kind of real consultation of how we move this forward. And obviously civil society and other people have a critical role here as well. In designing this kind of lunchtime seminar, I've had three co-conspirators. Ruud Rubin, who's sitting at the end there, who's from the Wageningen University Research. And Wageningen University, and you're going to meet the flagship leader from Wageningen University, Inga Brouwer, are coordinating the work on food systems in our program. So there's some international flavor that we're bringing to a Washington crowd there. Emmy Simmons, who's well known to many of you, was also in the working group to discuss this, and she's going to give us a bit of a summary of what she heard at the end of the seminar. And then one person who isn't here is Wijnen van Ijssel from the World Bank. He's a secondee from the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and there he's leading a program looking at food for all, and he's very much trying to engage the World Bank machinery in different parts of this agenda. So he's another co-conspirator when it comes to these public-private partnerships. So that's kind of the group that's put this together. What I'd like to do for the first few minutes is to frame some of the issues, not to answer them, but also to make sure that we understand some of the history and some of the strong positions that are in this nutrition agenda, and particularly in relation to how the public and private sector work, but not to answer questions, not to answer all the questions. So first of all, to be aware of some of the history, there have been some major conflicts between the public and private sector around nutrition. I don't think we should paper these over. The biggest one and the most passionately held one is around breast milk substitutes. So on the one hand, you have public health, which is trying to get exclusive breastfeeding for basically all women. And then you have a demand for breast milk substitutes as being met by the private sector, and many would say using, unfair market practices, et cetera. So this has gone on since the 70s, the 80s, and there are very bad feelings about this. In fact, if you look at the Access to Nutrition Index, which is a really good initiative to try and understand how private sector companies are trying to do a better job of making nutritious foods available through sustainability, health, and other indicators. Basically, the way they dealt with the breast milk substitute is they put a red flag beside every company that makes breast milk substitutes, because there was no really easy way around this problem. There's lots of noise right now around sugar and the kinds of discussions of how we've used evidence for sugar, how that's influenced policies, how that's influenced corporate behavior, all kinds of things. There's a lot of debate right now around ultra-processed foods and their harmful effects or unharmful effects. Meat is another topic that comes up where there's lots of divided opinion. There are some successes. I'm just going to raise one. I'm sure that other people will talk about one. Food safety in high-income countries works pretty well, and that's a pretty good public-private partnership. The private sector really runs the food safety, and there's public oversight. There's a lot of dialogue. Producers are involved. Works pretty effectively. We have the odd food scare or whatever, but if you think about the volume of foods and how they move and whatever, big success. But in our particular program, we're really interested in what happens in low and middle income countries, and these are the countries that are changing the fastest. I mean, high income countries are not changing anything like low and middle income countries. If you go to, especially the middle income countries now, you haven't been there for 6 months, you wonder how they managed to change so many things since you've been there last time. It's just incredible, the pace of change. And in that pace of change, it changes the nature of the public and private interactions on food systems. And the private sector is much more involved, there's much more value addition after the farm. There's a lot more processing, there's cold chains, there's all these things. So I think we have to be aware of that and how that's differentiated. Now, one of the things that's really, I mean, this whole discussion about food systems and public-private partnerships has really gained traction, I would say, in the last 10 years, and even more so in the last 5 years. And from the public side, the thing that's been known for some time, but people haven't really paid enough attention to it, is this dietary transition. And what we're seeing in the dietary transition is that in public programs in low and middle income countries, we've really focused on the problem of not enough calories, not enough micronutrients. And then we're quickly finding that we're moving into this situation where pretty quickly large parts of the population are becoming overweight and obese and suffering NCDs. And sometimes, like in South Asia, this is happening at body mass indexes below 25, like 23. You're seeing a lot of diabetes, a lot of coronary heart disease. So this kind of transition is scary, and not a lot of answers to it. But it's related to how diets are changing. People are eating less cereals. They're eating more meat. They're eating more vegetables when they're available. The prices are high. And we've had this kind of long-standing issue on the ag productivity side that we've been pretty good at supplying cereals, and their relative prices have gone down over the last 50 years. Not so of vegetables, not so of meat, not so of fish. So we've got some issues there as well. And so this has got a lot of traction, this dietary transition in public health. And for the first time in 2013, the global burden of health, people really started to pay attention to this issue about health and long-term burden of NCDs as a major issue. And so public health and even physicians are starting to get engaged in this agenda, which I don't think we've seen before. So that's a big issue. Now, part of the problem is, okay, people eat diets. So foods composed of diets, and there's many diets, and there's food cultures in different countries. Some diets are better and some diets are worse. I guess the way we look at it is, how do we make diets better? How do we mitigate the worst parts of diets and try and improve the better parts of diets? And this obviously looks different in the world. And so one of the messages I think that will come out today is that different parts of the world look different and they need different solutions. One of the concerns from the agriculture and food side is that we haven't paid enough attention to consumption. And that a kind of focus on consumption and demand may be the way to shift the way we get back to production. And so that's a critical emphasis. If you look at the public-private partnerships that have worked in food, a lot of them have been around complementary foods, the kind of RUTF foods where we can, like plumpy nut and things like that we can use for different populations. So we're good at those kinds of public-private interventions where there's an obvious public good and where we can create incentives for the private sector. How we get good nutrition into the core business of the private sector, I think, is a big issue, and one that's got to be part of this food systems agenda. So just to highlight this thinking about demand, and demand has a lot of dimensions. What people want, which the private sector understands, what people need, which we hope the public sector understands, and the private sector too. What they can pay for, what the planet can sustain, what value chains can supply. These are all issues around shaping demand. And the pictures are just to give you an idea of the high variation between countries and even within regions within countries of what the diets, what the food basket looks like that people are consuming. And so one of the things is that how do we take a kind of national food systems and then learn lessons across national food systems, but that this could look quite different in different countries. And so the importance of countries in the changing world is an important topic. And as I said, the growing importance of low and middle income countries. Their food businesses look different, but they're changing very fast. And so there's a lot of opportunities to learn, but things are different and we need differentiated strategies. And there's a lot of new players in the food business and in food systems that we need to pay attention to. So this kind of changing low and middle income countries. And finally, understanding the private sector. They're obviously more and more important. We must do this with them, but how does that look? And the longer value chains get, the more that it gets complicated with logistics and cold chain processing, etc. But there's diverse private actors, and you're going to hear people talking about kind of larger firms. We have multinationals that work everywhere, but then we also have larger private firms in individual countries. And some of them are quite big, like in India, and some of them are moderate sized in other countries. And then we have a lot of small, medium-sized enterprises, and we're going to hear a little bit about that dynamic. And they work in different contexts. They have different roles, different capacities, etc. And so this kind of how we understand each other and move this process forward is quite important. So those are just a few issues around the framing that I wanted to lay out. And then what are some of the entry points? Well, we're going to hear kind of, there's been a lot of distrust about it, including the public sector, and especially in low and middle income countries, in the kind of policy, regulatory, public investment debate. But they have a lot of skills to bring, so how do we do that? So we're going to have a couple of speakers talking to that. And then some of this principles and practices for how we bring the incentives and the practices of public-private together around specific food system innovations. We're going to have a number of speakers who are going to give you a kind of 3-minute intro teaser to what some of their insights, and then hopefully that'll spark further deliberation and follow-up conversations and work. Okay, so let me leave it there.